My name is Lauren Cassidy, and becoming a parent was never something I planned or even wanted. Still, that choice was taken out of my hands the day my sister left her sick kid on my couch and didn't bother coming back. Years passed, and when she finally decided to step into his life again, looking for praise and credit, I handed him the keys to his first car and told him, "Give these to the woman who actually raised you." He didn't even look at her as he walked past. She fell apart right there on the porch. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And let me ask you something. Have you ever had to clean up someone else's mess, only to be told later that you didn't belong in the story at all? Now let me take you back to where all of this really started. It was a Wednesday. One of those Seattle days that stays gray from morning to night, cold down to the bone, damp in a way that sinks into your clothes and your mood all at once. I was standing at the stove, reheating leftover soup, when the buzzer sounded again. By then I didn't even jump. I already knew who it was. Without saying a word, I buzzed her in. Seconds later, the apartment door flew open. There stood my younger sister, Vanessa. She had one of those tiny purses that couldn't possibly hold anything useful, and she was dragging a rolling suitcase behind her that wasn't even zipped shut. Sitting on top of it was her 10-year-old son, Dany, my nephew. His arms hanging loose at his sides. His lips were already pale. "You're early," I said under my breath, checking the clock. "I told you I had a call until 7. "I'm meeting someone," she replied, brushing past me like I wasn't even there, already heading for the couch. "Just for tonight," she added. I shut off the stove and turned to her. "You said that on Monday, and Sunday, and last Thursday." She didn't miss a beat. "He's got his meds. The nebulizer's in the suitcase. You know the routine." Dany didn't say a word. He shuffled over to the couch like a ghost, curled into himself, and started wheezing softly. That sound cut straight through me. "No. Vanessa, no," I said, stepping in front of the door. "Not this time. You can't keep doing this. He's sick. You can't just." She rolled her eyes and gave me that tight smile she always used whenever real life got mentioned. "I need a break. I've been doing this alone for years, Lauren. You wouldn't understand." "Oh, you mean the breaks between Cancun, Miami, and whatever yoga retreat you're calling personal growth now?" Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and defensive. "I'm serious," I said, louder now, my voice rough. "You're not being a mother. You're running away." She scoffed, grabbed her keys, and shook her head. "Whatever. You've always been jealous. You don't have kids, so now you get to play house. Enjoy it." Then she slammed the door. The apartment went quiet, broken only by the low hum of the nebulizer and the rasp of Dany's breathing. I knelt down beside him. His eyes were glassy, half-closed. His arms wrapped tight around his chest. "You okay, buddy?" I whispered. He nodded barely. I slid down onto the floor, leaning my back against the couch as the old TV flickered shadows across the walls. Without thinking, I checked the machine's timer. 12 minutes left. I let out a slow breath. She'd left him sick before, but something about this night felt different. He coughed, winced, and I reached for his hand, brushing my thumb across his wrist. "This isn't right," I muttered, not just to myself but to the universe. To whatever version of God might be listening. No kid should watch his mother walk out the door without looking back. And no grown man should be left holding the pieces like they were his responsibility from the start. But there wasn't time to break down. Machine beep. Dany's chest kept rising and falling like a tide I had to help steady. My soup sat untouched as my heart quietly shifted into a role I hadn't chosen. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd call her again. Tomorrow, I'd try to make her understand. But tonight I was the one staying. The next evening it was just the two of us again. The apartment lights buzzed softly as I set 2 chipped plates on the small kitchen table. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Comfort food. About the only thing I could make without burning it. The smell filled the room, warm and familiar, but Dany only picked at the crust like it was a chore. He still looked pale. His dark curls clung to his forehead, damp with sweat. His breathing was a little steadier, but the shadows under his eyes hadn't gone anywhere. "You don't have to finish it," I said gently, sitting across from him. "Just try." He nodded without lifting his head. The silence stretched until the ticking clock above the fridge filled the space, marking every second his mother should have been there. I really looked at him then. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't asking for the TV or a phone. He just sat there quietly, like a kid who'd learned how easy it was to disappear. So I finally asked what had been weighing on me since the night before. "Do you miss her?" At first he didn't react. Then his shoulders lifted in the smallest shrug. "She only talks to me when she's mad." That answer hit harder than any tears could have. He reached for his spoon and missed, his fingers shaking. I covered his hand with mine. His skin felt warm and fragile, like someone who'd been getting by without anyone really seeing him. "You know this isn't your fault, right?" said my voice cracking. "None of it is." He didn't respond, just stared into the bowl like the words didn't know where to land. I squeezed his hand gently. "I'm here," I said. "And I'm not going anywhere." He finally looked up. His eyes, big, tired and brown, held something unfamiliar. Not trust yet, but maybe the first hint of it. We stayed like that, hands linked across the stained table, soup cooling between us. I didn't rush the quiet. I let it sit. And the more I paid attention, the more I noticed. The way he flinched when my phone rang. How he never asked when his mom was coming back. How he apologized after every cough, like he was scared of being a problem. That's when it hit me. This wasn't temporary. Not really. She might show up for a night, maybe a week, smiling if the mood struck. But she wasn't staying. She'd already left in all the ways that mattered. I stood up and took his bowl back to the stove to warm the soup. He started to object, but I cut him off with a small wave and slid the bowl into the microwave anyway. While it hummed, I leaned against the sink, fingers curled tight around the counter's edge. Somewhere in that moment it settled into my bones. This kid was mine now. Not by blood. Not on paper. But by some quiet, invisible bond that locked into place the second Vanessa slammed that door and walked away. I couldn't fix everything. I couldn't magically make his lungs stronger or erase the years of letdowns etched behind his eyes. But I could do one thing. Could show up. Every day. I could be the one who stayed when everyone else didn't. The microwave beeped. I carried the warm bowl back to the table and sat down across from him. Dany looked up, confused. "I thought you didn't want me to waste it," he said. I smiled and nudged the bowl closer. "I said try," I told him. "Not quit." He dipped his spoon back in, slower this time. I watched him eat, and something inside me settled. Not anger. Not sadness. Just resolve. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make noise but still changes everything. This boy would have a home. He would have peace. He would never again lie awake wondering if someone would show up for him or disappear depending on their mood. He would never feel invisible in a room full of people. He was mine now. It was just after midnight when the soft whir of the nebulizer finally stopped. Dany had been asleep for hours, curled up on the pull-out couch in the living room, surrounded by pillows like a little fortress. His stuffed bear was tucked under his arm, held tight. That thing had been through it. One ear barely hanging on, its belly stitched up with mismatched blue thread, but Dany never let it out of reach. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring down at my phone like maybe this time it would surprise me. Maybe this time she'd answer. Maybe she'd be sober. Maybe she'd sound like a mother. I took a breath and hit dial. The ringing dragged on, echoing off the hum of the fridge and the ticking clock on the stove. Then finally a giggle. Music. The sound of waves in the background. "Hello." Vanessa's voice floated through the speaker, glossy and loose, like a drunk sunscreen commercial. "Lauren, where are you? Where are you?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "Oh, you called," she sang. "I was just telling Eric my sister was probably being dramatic again." "Vanessa, come get your son," I said. "He's sick, and I'm not doing this alone anymore." You don't get to drop him off like luggage and vanish for days. She laughed. Actually laughed. High-pitched and carefree, like nothing I said mattered. I'm in Tulum, babe, she said, like it was something to envy. It's gorgeous. The moon here. Unreal. Eric booked this place. Plunge pool and everything. You should really try dating. Your wound's so tight. My mouth went dry. You left the country. She sighed like I was exhausting her. Don't be dramatic. He's with you. He's fine. You're always so good with him. Honestly, just admit it. You love playing house. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles burned. You're his mother. No, honey, she said, her voice dropping low, syrupy, almost amused. You are now. Then the call ended. I stared at the phone, her words bouncing around in my head. You're now. A laugh pushed up my throat, sharp and bitter, but it cracked halfway into a sob. I slid down onto the cold tile floor, my back against the cabinet, the phone clattering beside me. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes, maybe. Long enough for the house to settle, for the fridge to kick on, for the silence to press in from every direction. My chest ached from holding everything in for too long. I pressed my palms into my eyes like I could force the tears back, but it didn't work. I cried quietly. For Dany, for myself, for the sister I used to believe in, for the family I once thought we might be. I cried because I was exhausted and scared. Because I had no idea what came next. And because somewhere deep down, I already knew this wasn't temporary anymore. Vanessa wasn't coming back. Not in any way that mattered. I pictured Dany hunched over his soup. His small voice. She doesn't really talk to me unless she's mad. He was 10 years old. And the one person who was supposed to protect him had handed him off and gone to sip cocktails in another country. This wasn't a favor. This wasn't babysitting. This was abandonment. And now I was all he had. I pulled my knees to my chest and bowed my head, the cold floor seeping into my arms. The worst part was, I couldn't even be angry at her anymore. Anger meant expectation. And I'd finally stopped expecting anything from Vanessa. I cried until there was nothing left. Until the weight in my chest hardened into something colder. Sharper. Quieter. Resolve. Because I didn't get to fall apart. Not with a little boy asleep in the next room who needed someone in the morning. Someone to warm his soup. Check his meds. Ask him how his day was and actually care about the answer. I stood up slowly and wiped my face with my sleeve. This wasn't the life I planned, but it was the one I'd been handed. And I wasn't about to let him down now. Morning crept in softly. Pale sunlight slipped through the blinds, cutting long lines across the hardwood floor. The Seattle clouds finally thinned, like the day itself wasn't sure it was allowed to show up. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out on the couch, the blanket twisted around my legs, my mind worn raw from too much truth all at once. Dany woke up first. I heard the couch cushions shift, followed by a small cough and a sharp inhale as he stretched and blinked into the light. I pushed myself upright, eyes burning. "Hey, kiddo," I whispered. "How are you feeling?" He rubbed his eyes and looked at me. "Better, I think." Then he smiled. "Can I have toast?" That was it. No questions about his mom. No fear. No confusion. Just toast. My heart thumped hard in my chest. "Yeah," I said, standing up. "I can do toast." In the kitchen, I cracked eggs into a bowl. One shell split wrong, jagged pieces dropping into the yolk. I muttered a curse and fished them out with a spoon. Dany padded in and climbed onto one of the stools at the counter, hair sticking up everywhere, cheeks pink from sleep. "You look tired," he said. "You look like a porcupine that lost a fight," I shot back, keeping it light. He broke into a grin and sniffed the air like a bloodhound. "Are you cooking?" "I can cook," I said, lifting the pan and setting it on the burner. "Sometimes. Under extreme conditions. With supervision." He rested his chin on the counter, studying me like I was a contestant on a cooking show about to crack. "You gonna set off the smoke alarm?" "Only if things go really well." "Cool." That did it. I laughed, really laughed. Loud and sudden, right from my gut. The sound felt like it knocked something loose inside my chest. Dany's smile widened, proud and pleased with himself. "That's the first time you've laughed in forever," he said. It wasn't a question. I looked at him, surprised by how clearly he saw me. Kids notice more than people think, especially the quiet ones. "Well," I said, "it's been a heavy couple of days." He tilted his head. "Because of Mom." I hesitated. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't want to hurt him with the truth. "Because being a grown-up is hard sometimes," I said instead. "But you've been amazing." He didn't press. Just shrugged and watched as I slid the eggs onto two mismatched plates. "I like it here," he said suddenly, chewing on his toast. "It's not loud like Mom's place." I swallowed. "You can stay as long as you want, Dany." He looked up at me, brow creased. "Really?" "Yeah," I said. "Really." Something shifted then. Not a promise. Not a contract. Just the first spark of trust. A thin thread stretching quietly between us, but strong all the same. "These eggs taste like sadness," he announced, completely serious. I stared at him for half a second, then burst out laughing again. "They are not that bad." He took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. "They taste like the food version of a Monday." "All right, Gordon Ramsay," I said. "You're cooking next time." We ate at the counter while sunlight slowly crept in, highlighting the cracks in the walls and the dust on the shelves. Somehow, it still made the place feel warmer. Like maybe this apartment could be a home, something real, not just a temporary landing spot. After breakfast, Dany pulled out a sketch pad I hadn't even known he brought. While he drew, I washed dishes at the sink. When I glanced over, I saw what looked suspiciously like me holding a fire extinguisher next to a pile of burned toast. I smiled to myself. Maybe I could do this, not just scrape by in survival mode but actually do it right. Not because Vanessa disappeared. Not because I had no other option. But because I wanted to. I looked at Dany again. Focused. Leaning against the counter, I murmured under my breath. "Maybe we can figure this out." The toast hadn't burned. The eggs hadn't killed him. And I hadn't fallen apart. The sun kept shining through the blinds. And for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like the sky was about to cave in. I used to think I was busy back when my life was all client calls, deadlines, and debugging code until my eyes went crossed. But this careful, quiet chaos of raising a kid who wasn't technically mine, but needed me like oxygen, this was a whole different level of commitment. The days started early now. I'd wake up before sunrise to squeeze in a few hours of freelance work, mostly development contracts from old contacts and UX cleanup jobs for small local businesses trying to stay afloat. After that, I'd pack Dany's lunch, double-check his inhaler, and walk him to school, even though he insisted he could handle the 5 blocks on his own. "Humor me," I'd say. "I'm not made of glass," he'd grumble, zipping his backpack. "I know," I'd reply. "I just like seeing you make it through the doors." He'd roll his eyes, but he always shot me a sideways grin before heading in. Then I'd rush to my second shift, usually at a bookstore down in Capitol Hill that paid more in free coffee and leftover muffins than actual money. On weekends, I picked up remote tech support gigs in the afternoons while Dany played quietly in the corner with old Legos or disappeared into a book. Money was tight. Tighter than I liked to admit. Some days I skipped meals to stretch groceries. Some nights I lay awake counting weeks until Dany's prescription needed refilling. Still, we made it work. We became a team. Our evenings settled into a rhythm I didn't even realize I'd been missing. Homework at the kitchen table, leftover pasta reheated 3 different ways, and the sound of Dany laughing when I butchered the names in the fantasy books he read out loud before bed. One rainy night, the apartment glowing warm under a single old lamp, I sat across from him while he worked on a math worksheet. I was half focused on my laptop, sorting through project notes, when something made me stop. He wasn't guessing. He was solving problems 2 or 3 years ahead of his grade. I leaned closer. "Wait, how'd you do that one?" He shrugged. "I watched a video about prime factors. And I remembered what you said about patterns." He held up the page, eyes bright. See. If you factor this and divide by 3, it's the same as reducing both sides. I stared at the paper, then at him. You're kind of a genius, kid. His cheeks flushed red. Only 'cause you help me. No, I said, leaning back with a grin. You're annoyingly smart. The kind of smart that gets kids bumped up a grade. Wouldn't that be weird? He asked quietly. Everyone's staring at me. They'd look at you and think, wow, that kid's amazing. He smiled at the paper, pencil tapping softly. Then he said almost casually, Mom used to say I was too much. My throat tightened. She was wrong, I said gently. You're not too much. You're just more than she knew how to handle. He looked up at me. Do you think I'm too much? I leaned forward. I think you're exactly who you're supposed to be. And I'm lucky I get to see it. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was warm. He went back to his work, humming softly to himself. I watched him, wondering how long he'd been waiting for someone to really see him. Not as a problem, not as a burden, but as a person worth choosing. That kid was something special. Bright, endlessly curious, gentle in a way that made me feel protective clear down to my bones. When he finished the last problem, he slid the worksheet toward me and grinned. You should make a trophy for best tutor. Oh, should I? Said. He nodded seriously. You'd win second place. Second? I raised an eyebrow. I don't get first. He stared at me, completely deadpan. No. Cracked up. As I cleared the table and rinsed out our mugs of lukewarm cocoa, I caught my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I looked exhausted, hair a mess, hoodie I hadn't washed in days, but there was something else there too. Pride. The kind that comes from doing something that matters. Like I was building something real one night at a time. Saturday mornings quickly became my safe place. No alarms, no school rush, no client emails before coffee. Just quiet. The good kind. The kind that settles into your bones and hums low and steady. I was wrapped up burrito style in my comforter, the sky outside still more gray than blue, when a smell pulled me out of sleep. It wasn't bad. Just unexpected. Warm. Wheat. Vanilla maybe, and something faintly burnt. My eyes flew open. I sat up listening. A drawer slammed. Something splattered onto a hot pan. I bolted out of bed, heart pounding. Dany! No answer. I padded down the hallway in my socks, following the smell as it grew stronger. Butter. Syrup. And definitely smoke. I turned the corner and froze. Dany stood in the middle of the kitchen, flour dusted across his shirt, an apron 2 sizes too big tied crooked around his waist. His curls were sticking out in every direction. On the stove, a pan sizzled with something golden and lumpy. The counter behind him was pure chaos, eggshells everywhere, syrup tipped on its side, and a plate stacked with pancakes in various states of doneness. He turned and beamed. Surprise! I made breakfast. And blinked. You made all this? Yep, he said proudly, lifting the spatula like a trophy. I even Googled how not to burn the pan. Kind of. I glanced at the stove. One pancake was actively turning into a tiny black meteor. I rushed forward and slid it off the burner, laughing despite myself. You're going to set off the smoke alarm. He shrugged. Then we get pancakes and a fire drill. I looked at him, my chest swelling in a way I hadn't expected. You didn't have to do this. He suddenly looked unsure. I wanted to. I knelt in front of him, taking in every messy detail. The syrup on his sleeve, the egg smudge on his cheek, the nervous hope in his eyes. You didn't have to, I said again softer. But you just made my whole year. His face lit up. Without warning, he wrapped his arms around my neck. I hugged him back tight, burying my face in his shoulder. There was no obligation in that moment. No sense of settling or just surviving. It was love, simple, solid, earned through pancakes, syrup, and early morning chaos. Happy Saturday, he mumbled into my hair. When we finally sat down, I took a bite of one of the pancakes. It was memorable. Chewy in places, crunchy in others, with a burnt edge that could double as charcoal. Dany watched me closely. Be honest. Scale of 1 to 10. I chewed thoughtfully. I'd say a solid 4.7. He gasped dramatically. Out of 10. Out of 5. He burst into laughter, syrup dripping off his fork. Okay, next time I'll measure the flour. Maybe. We ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. His science project, the book he was reading, a squirrel he'd seen slip on the icy sidewalk that he insisted deserved its own viral video. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't thinking about bills or work or Vanessa, or the long list of things we didn't have. I was just there. In a tiny kitchen. With burnt pancakes, sticky counters, and a boy who somehow made the mess feel like home. When we finished, Dany stood and started stacking plates. You don't have to do that, I said. He shrugged. You cook, I clean. And I cooked badly. Exactly, I said. That's why I'm cleaning, he replied with a smirk. I couldn't stop smiling. There was something steady in the rhythm we'd found. Like a heartbeat. One I didn't know I needed, but now couldn't imagine losing. Later that morning, I watched from the window as he bundled up and ran outside, hurling snowballs at the tree trunks in the courtyard. His laughter echoed up the stairwell. For once, I didn't feel that old ache of waiting, for Vanessa to call, for someone else to step in and take over. There was no waiting anymore. It was just us. And that was enough. The clinic was unusually quiet that morning. No coughing kids. No daytime talk show blaring from the mounted TV. Just the soft shuffle of papers and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Dany sat beside me in one of the oversized chairs, legs swinging, clutching a dog-eared book he'd brought along. He looked calm. I wasn't. I'd been here enough times to know how these appointments could go. Sometimes you walked out relieved. Other times it felt like the ground shifted under your feet. Dany's health had improved. No wheezing in weeks, no emergency inhaler since the last cold snap. But chronic illness doesn't care how hard you try or how much you love someone. It shows up on its own schedule. I glanced at him. His face was half hidden behind the book, but I could see the corner of a smile. His lips moved as he read silently. You nervous? Asked, trying to sound casual. He shook his head. Not really. You are, though. I raised an eyebrow. How do you know? You're doing the leg bounce, he said without looking up. And your mouth does that tight line thing when you pretend you're not worried. I stared at him, impressed, and a little exposed. Have you been studying me? He finally looked up, grinning. You're not that mysterious, Lauren. I smirked and ruffled his hair, grateful for the ease he gave me without even trying. Before I could say more, the door opened and Dr. Mora stepped in, clipboard tucked under her arm, glasses sliding down her nose. She'd been Dany's pediatric pulmonologist from the start, warm, sharp, and never one to sugarcoat. Hey, you two, she said, closing the door. How's my favorite troublemaker? Dany sat up straighter. Not wheezing. She smiled. Excellent. Let's see if your lungs agree, Dr. Mora said gently. She moved through the exam with her usual calm focus, listening to his breathing, checking his oxygen levels, pressing lightly along his ribs while asking questions he answered like a pro. I sat stiffly in the corner chair, gripping the armrest as if it could keep me steady. Every beep of the monitor made my heart jump. Every pause while she wrote something down felt endless. When she finally straightened up, her face stayed neutral for half a second. Then she smiled. Well, she said, turning fully toward me, I'll be honest. I'm impressed. And blinked. Really impressed, she continued. His lungs are much stronger than they were at the last visit. The inflammation is down. His peak flow numbers are up. And he's responding beautifully to the maintenance meds. Keep doing what you're doing, and he's going to live a full, active life. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it left me in a shaky rush. Dany's eyes went wide. He reached for my hand, and I took it without thinking, squeezing tight. Are you crying? He asked softly, tilting his head. I blinked hard. No, I said quickly. You're imagining things. Dr. Mora chuckled. This is really good news, Lauren. The consistency, the routine, the medication, the stability. It's working. Stability. The word rang through me like a bell. It hadn't been easy. The late nights, the extra shifts, the coupons clipped, the quiet panic every time the pharmacy texted about a refill. But it was working. He was okay. We're going to be okay, I whispered, mostly to myself. Dany beamed. Told you. I ran my fingers through his hair and nodded. Yeah, you did. Dr. Mora handed me the updated care plan and reminded me about our follow-up in 3 months. I thanked her, still floating on relief, and helped Dany into his jacket. On the walk home, he skipped ahead on the sidewalk, kicking through piles of dry leaves blown into the gutter. The air was crisp and clean, carrying a faint scent of pine. I watched him, this brilliant boy I hadn't given birth to, but who somehow belonged to me anyway, and felt something settle deep inside. Not fear, not guilt. Oh, we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. The day the Stanford envelope arrived, I cried before I even opened it. Dany stood beside me on the front steps, holding the thick, glossy packet like it might vanish if he blinked. His hands shook, not from fear. Somewhere deep down, he'd always known where he was headed. He asked me to open it anyway. So I did. When I read the words out loud, "We are pleased to offer you admission." He closed his eyes and let out a breath like he'd been holding it in for years. Full scholarship. Everything covered. I pulled him into my arms and held on like my life depended on it. 3 weeks later, I handed him a small red box. The wrapping paper was gold, reused so many times it still carried creases from holidays long past. He looked confused as he opened it, then froze. "The hatchback," he whispered. "The red one. The one I kept pointing at." "The one you said was too much," I added, smiling even though my heart was racing. "It's yours." "But, Lauren, it's used," I said quickly. "Low mileage. Reliable. Good on gas. And most important, it's yours." I didn't tell him I drained my emergency savings, or skipped a vacation to make the last payment. I just watched his eyes go glassy and knew every sacrifice had been worth it. "You didn't have to," he said. I cupped his face. "I wanted to." He hugged me harder than he ever had before, one hand still clutching the keys. That night, I lit a candle in the window, like I always did when he was out driving, just until he came home. I was curled on the couch with a book I wasn't really reading when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I should have let it go to voicemail. I didn't. "Hello." A voice I hadn't heard in over a year slid through the line, sweet and syrupy. "Lauren, hey, it's Vanessa." I sat up straight. My fingers went cold. "I heard my son got into Stanford," she chirped. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of him." My heart slammed against my ribs as I stood and drifted into the kitchen, like moving might keep me grounded. "You lost the right to say that," I said carefully. "Oh, come on," she laughed. "Don't be like that. He's still my son." I stayed quiet. The silence gave her room to push. "I've been thinking," she continued, her tone shifting. "Maybe it's time we reconnect. I could fly in for move-in weekend. Be there for him. So he knows I care." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Now?" "Yes. Now you want to show up." She bristled. I could hear it in the pause. "I'm still his mother, Lauren. You don't get to erase that." I pressed a hand to my chest, forcing my breathing to slow. "You erased yourself." "Oh, please." I gave him life. "Don't act like you're some saint." "No," I whispered. "I'm just the one who stayed." The line went quiet. Not disconnected, just empty. She didn't know how to answer that. Maybe she never had. Finally, her voice came back colder. "He'll come looking for me one day. You can't keep him from me forever." I didn't reply. I ended the call and deleted the number. Back in the living room, the candle flickered softly in the window. Minutes later, tires crunched in the driveway. The front door squeaked open. Dany stepped inside, smiling, keys still in his hand. She drives like a dream. Kept my voice steady. Good. You deserve it. He dropped onto the couch beside me. You okay? Pause. Then I really looked at him, strong, kind, whole. I am now, I said. The house felt quieter after he left for school, even though it wasn't empty. He'd only been gone a few weeks when I caught myself setting out 2 plates for dinner or glancing at the clock, thinking he should be home by now. Then I'd remember. He wasn't across the street anymore. He was across the state. And somehow the quiet didn't hurt. It hummed, soft, steady, full of purpose. He called every Sunday. Not just to talk about classes or professors, though he did tell me, glowing, that his computer science professor had already asked him to help with a research project. He talked to me like I still mattered, like I was still part of his world, like I was still his person. Sometimes when he called, I could hear him hustling between classes, the wind rushing past the phone, or the clatter of dishes behind him during late shifts at the campus dining hall. Just a few hours a week, he'd said. No big deal. A few months into his freshman year, I got a Venmo notification. Money-tagged groceries. Buy the good cereal this time. I sat down and cried when I saw it. It wasn't about the money. It was the thought behind it. Care. The way life had somehow come full circle. We'd spent so many years in survival mode that small kindnesses felt sacred. Things like remembering how someone takes their coffee, or knowing which brand of bread doesn't go stale in 2 days. Winter came early that year, and along with it came the truth I'd been avoiding. My old Corolla, the car that had carried Dany to doctor appointments, science fairs, and late-night pharmacy runs, was finally giving out. The check engine light wasn't just on anymore. Flashed like a warning siren. I made my peace with it. The car had done its job. Had taken care of us. I figured something out. I always did. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, I opened the front door to grab a package. And there he was. Dany stood on the porch, jacket soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead, arms full of groceries, grinning like he'd just pulled off the greatest surprise of his life. "Miss me," he said. I couldn't speak. "You didn't answer your phone," he added, stepping inside. "So I figured I'd come check that you were still alive." He dropped the bags onto the kitchen counter. Milk. A pack of chocolate chip cookies, the kind I liked but never bought for myself. Then he turned back to me, wiping rain from his cheeks. "You're supposed to be in Palo Alto," I finally managed. "It's reading week. I had the weekend off." He lifted a hand. "But before you say anything else, we're going shopping tomorrow." I stared at him. "Shopping? For a car," he said simply. "Yours is on life support. Dany, you're a student. You don't have." "I've been saving," he said like it was nothing. "Campus jobs, tutoring, tech stuff, freelance work on the side. I've got enough. And it's not a gift, it's a thank you." My chest tightened. "You shouldn't be taking care of me," I said quietly. He smiled, calm and sure. "You already took care of me." I wrapped my arms around him before I even realized I was moving. He was taller now, broader, solid. But he leaned into the hug the same way he used to when he was 10, the kid who startled at loud noises and slept with a stuffed bear tucked under one arm. "I didn't do anything special," I whispered. "You did everything," he said. The next day we bought a modest used sedan, deep forest green. Nothing flashy, just dependable, strong. A lot like the love we'd built together. He handed me the keys the same way I once handed them to him. Hands steady, eyes bright. And I realized it wasn't really about the car. It was about knowing we'd made it to the other side. Not perfect. Not without scars. A whole. It was mid-July, and the apartment windows were wide open, letting in the first real breeze after a brutal heat wave. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, marinara smudged on my cheek, oven mitts dangling from my fingers. The lasagna bubbled in the oven. The salad wilted slightly from too much attention. I'd reheated the garlic bread 3 times just to stay busy. Dany was bringing someone home. Not just someone, Nina. His girlfriend. We'd FaceTimed once or twice. Exchanged polite hellos during calls. But tonight was different. This wasn't casual anymore. This was meet the family territory. And somehow I was the family. He hadn't said it outright, but I felt it in everything. The way he cleaned the apartment top to bottom, the way he made sure I wasn't working late, the way he came home 2 hours early just in case the lasagna needed backup. "She's sweet," he'd told me that morning. "Smart. Keeps me grounded." I tried not to let my stomach flip at how grown he sounded. I was wiping the counter for the 4th time when I heard keys at the door. It turned heart-skipping. Dany walked in first, taller than ever, carrying that same easy confidence. Beside him was a petite brunette in a sundress, awkwardly holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "Hi," she said brightly, stepping forward before he could even speak. "You must be Lauren. I've been waiting forever to meet you." I blinked, caught off guard by her warmth. "Hi, Nina. Come in." Dany shot me a proud little smile behind her back. She handed me the flowers, cheeks pink. I didn't know what to bring, so I figured these were safe. "They're perfect," I said, fighting tears over a bouquet. "Thank you." Dinner was a little stiff at first. "Fuss too much." Dany teased me. Nina laughed nervously. But once the plates were full and we settled in, something shifted. She was easy, bright, curious, unpretentious. She asked real questions. She listened. She didn't flinch when Dany talked about growing up with asthma and money stress. She didn't look away when I mentioned working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. She understood. And I liked her immediately. Halfway through dessert, store-bought tiramisu that Dany swore was authentic enough, he set down his fork and cleared his throat. "I wanted you to meet her here," he said steady, "because this place is part of who I am. Everything I've done, everywhere I've gone, it started here." Nina looked at him, then at me, waiting. "I told you before that I didn't have the easiest childhood," he continued. "I remember," she said gently. He nodded. "What I didn't say enough is that I had someone who showed up, who made soup when I was sick, who worked until midnight and still came to every school event smiling. Someone who never gave up on me." My throat closed. He looked at me, then really looked. "I want you to meet the person who raised me." The room went still. Nina smiled softly, like none of this surprised her. "He talks about you all the time," she said. "Like, all the time." I couldn't speak. My hand covered my mouth before the tears escaped. I'd always known he loved me. I saw it in the notes he left, in the calls he made when he didn't need anything. But this was different. This was recognition. This was truth. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, eyes shining. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the aunt who stepped in. I didn't feel like a stand-in. For the first time, I didn't just feel like I'd stepped in. Felt like Mom. The rain had been falling steadily since morning, tapping against the windows in a slow, relentless rhythm. I was curled up on the couch with a book, a blanket draped over my legs, wrapped in the kind of quiet that only comes after years of learning how to breathe through storms instead of fighting them. Dany was upstairs packing. He was heading back to school the next day, and we'd spent most of the weekend eating leftovers, rewatching old movies, and pretending the goodbye wasn't already hanging in the corners of every conversation. Then there was the knock. 3 sharp raps on the door, followed immediately by the shrill ping of the doorbell. I knew before I even stood up. Some instincts never leave you. When I opened the door, Vanessa stood on the porch, soaked through, a suitcase planted at her feet and a smile stretched too wide across her face. "Surprise," she said, like this was perfectly normal. "I figured it was time." I didn't move. The smell of cheap perfume mixed with damp fabric drifted into the house. Her lipstick was smudged. Mascara streaked beneath her eyes. "Time for what?" "Yes. To see my son," she said. "To reconnect. It's been long enough, don't you think?" The suitcase slipped from her grip and clattered onto the porch. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside. She took that as an invitation and walked in, her eyes roaming the room like she still belonged there. "Looks the same," she muttered. "A little tighter. Cozier." That's when Dany came down the stairs. He stopped at the bottom step. He was taller than her now, broader through the shoulders. His expression calm but unreadable. Vanessa froze when she saw him. "Dany," she breathed. "Oh baby, look at you. All grown up." He didn't smile. He didn't move. She took a tentative step forward, arms lifting slightly, but he didn't meet her halfway. "You're not a guest here," he said, his voice flat. She blinked. "What?" "You're a stranger." The words hit like glass shattering on tile. Her mouth opened but nothing came out, just a sharp breath, the sound of something breaking in real time. Dany turned to me then, steady and composed. "You still like that blue sedan, right?" I nodded slowly, unsure where he was going. He looked back at Vanessa. "I was going to surprise her with it next weekend. Trade in the hatchback. She deserves better." Vanessa stumbled back a step, mascara running freely now. "Dany, please," she said. "I made mistakes. I know that. But I'm still your—" "No," he interrupted, quiet but unmovable. "You had a choice. You made it. Now I'm making mine." She turned to me, eyes wild. "You poisoned him against me." Before I could speak, Dany answered. "No," he said. "She saved me from you." The silence that followed was heavy. Absolute. Final. Vanessa's lip trembled. She grabbed her suitcase and backed toward the door. I thought maybe I could fix things," she whispered. Dany didn't respond. She stepped back into the rain and didn't look back. The next morning the rain was gone. Sunlight poured across the kitchen floor, catching in the steam rising from two mismatched mugs of tea. Dany sat at the table in his hoodie, one knee tucked up against his chest, scrolling through his phone like any other 20-something on a lazy morning. Like nothing had shattered the air the night before. And in a way nothing had, because she was gone. Vanessa didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't linger for one last plea. She disappeared without another word, like the silence itself was her final confession. And somehow that was enough. "I made eggs," I said, sliding a plate toward him. "Not Monday eggs. The good kind." He looked up and smiled. "You didn't burn them. Don't start." He laughed and dug in. There was a quiet between us, but not the heavy kind. Not the kind that waits for grief to settle. This one was familiar. Easy. The kind that fills a room because nothing needs to be said to be understood. We'd faced the worst of her, and it hadn't undone us. After breakfast, I rinsed dishes while he flipped through the mail. The normalcy of it all felt almost unreal. "She'll try again," I said finally, not turning around. He paused. "Yeah, maybe." Exhaled. "I don't want you carrying that." "I'm not," he said, setting the envelopes down. "I meant what I said. I made my choice." I turned to him. "You're sure?" He met my eyes, gentle but unshakable. "Lauren, I'm home." My throat tightened. "You okay?" He gave me that same crooked smile he used to flash at 10 years old when he didn't want me to worry. "I'm good," he said. "You?" I let the question settle. This version of life, without her hovering at the edges, felt light. Not like something was missing, but like something had healed. He nodded. "Better than ever." That night, we watched a movie neither of us really paid attention to, trading comments and old jokes. When he drifted off on the couch, one leg hanging over the edge like he still lived there full time, I didn't wake him. I sat in the glow of the screen, sipping cold tea, listening to his breathing. Steady, strong, alive. Vanessa had become what she was always meant to be. A ghost in our story. And ghosts can't haunt a home filled with love. The chapel was small and sunlit, filled with wildflowers. Dany had insisted on choosing himself. He stood at the front, tie slightly crooked the way it always was, posture steady and sure. Beside him, Nina glowed in ivory, her hand wrapped gently around his. And me. I stood at the altar not as a guest, not as a bystander, but as the mother of the groom. The soft blue dress Nina had helped me choose weeks earlier fluttered in the breeze drifting through the open doors. My hands trembled, but my heart was calm. There was no sign of Vanessa. No mention of her. Not even a whisper from extended relatives. Dany had been clear from the beginning. "You raised me," he'd said simply. "This day is for us." The ceremony was brief and beautiful. There were tears. Laughter too. Especially when Nina's 3-year-old nephew, the ring-bearer, tried to eat the flowers. But mostly there was joy. Overflowing. Undeniable. Later at the reception, Dany lifted his champagne glass and tapped it gently for silence. "I won't say much," he said with a sheepish grin. "But there's one person I need to thank." He turned to me. "To the woman who gave me a home, a future, and a heart," he said. "Mom, I love you." The room erupted in applause. And I stood there, smiling through tears, knowing with absolute certainty I had never been a stand-in. I was exactly who I was meant to be. But all I could do was smile through tears. Because in that moment, I knew the truth that had taken me years to believe. I was never the backup. I had always been the one who mattered. That was the end of my story. The day I stood at my son's wedding and realized love isn't about who gives birth to you, but who stays when it's hardest. Sometimes I still wonder about Vanessa showing up that rainy Sunday with a suitcase, saying she wanted to reconnect. Was she truly trying to change, or was it just too late to undo the damage? And did she do the right thing by finally coming back, even if it cost her everything? Tell me in the comments what you think. Did she do the right thing or not? And if this journey meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe, because stories like mine remind me we're never alone in the choices that shape our lives.